Good afternoon to you viewers. This is the Colonel speaking to you live from the Grange for British Imperial YouTube Broadcasting. Today we've got another one of those Columbia educational records from the late 1920s. This one is lecture number 8, part 1 and 2, Good Speech by Walter Ripman, M.A. Here we go.
What is good English speech? The answer is not very simple or obvious. It is easier to tell when speech is bad. When we listen to a lecturer whose words we cannot follow without an effort, or when he has unpleasant mannerisms, we are justly annoyed. When we are at the theatre and miss some of the dialogue, because one of the actors has not learned to use his voice properly, we are disappointed. We expect public speakers to take trouble over their speech, in order that we who listen to them may be saved trouble. And speaking generally, they realize this and do take pains. There is a kind of speech that we expect to hear from them, and we will try and ascertain which among the many varieties of English speech it is. Let us consider some of these varieties. There are local forms of English, which we call dialects. We find them in the earliest stages of our language, when there was no such thing as standard speech. In the country, where the social organization is simple, pure dialects survive. In such a highly complex community as a modern town, speech varies greatly. There are many gradations, ranging from something like pure dialect to standard speech. Dialects have their special interest and charm, and have a rightful place in literature. But no dialect is preeminent in those qualities which we require of good speech. Dialect undergoes changes which do not render it less well fitted for conversational intercourse in a small area, but its development takes no heed of the requirements of public speaking or of artistic speaking. Next, there are temporal varieties of speech. Language is subject to change in course of time. The changes are sometimes due to the desire to economize effort. It is easier to say castle than castle, and breakfast than breakfast. Other changes, especially in vowels, are much harder to explain. Language is not stable, and never has been. Minor varieties of pronunciation are to be found in certain classes of society. For a time it was fashionable to pronounce R's as W's, as may be gathered from early volumes of Punch. Later, people used to go riding and driving without G's. Speech also varies with the individual. Take two extremes, the pedantic and the slipshod speaker. The pedantic speaker tries to improve on standard speech. He goes one better than the ordinary educated speaker. He may utter certain vowels in what we call a mincing way. He dwells on certain consonants, the H in forehead or the T in often, which are normally silent. His attitude is one of superiority, and that is offensive, antisocial. The slipshod speaker speaks with the least expenditure of effort. He makes only just enough movement of his tongue and lips to suggest the sound. He drops sounds and even whole syllables. Do you know her? Becomes to know her. A basket of strawberries becomes a basket of straw. His attitude implies indifference or contempt, and that too is offensive and antisocial.
Right, side 2 viewers. I often go riding, but not in a minced way, I can assure you. Dear, oh dear.
While there always has been and still remains so much variety of speech, a growing tendency to uniformity has manifested itself, particularly in the last 100 years. Many influences have been at work. The great public schools, staffed almost exclusively by men from the older universities, have long served to spread a definite form of English speech. A boy who comes there with dialect peculiarities is soon led by his schoolfellows to give them up. The public school does not encourage anything eccentric. The remarkable advance in the education of women has had a similar effect. The average woman teacher speaks well, and the average girl has better powers of imitating speech sounds and a keener sense of the social advantages of good speech than her brother. The speech she has acquired at school she will later hand on as teacher or as mother. The effect of this teaching is especially noticeable in the modern type of secondary schools. As a rule, the girls, and often the boys, in the upper forms of these schools, are quite at ease in the use of standard speech. The improvement in the means of communication, which leads to more travelling and to a more shifting population, also tends to favour standard speech at the expense of dialect. A man coming to a different part of the country will be inclined to give up dialect words that are not understood by those to whom he speaks, and he will, more or less unconsciously, modify his pronunciation so as to make it more readily intelligible. Teachers, in particular, often transfer from one town to another and have a strong incentive to use a form of speech that their pupils can follow without difficulty. The influence of the orator and the lecturer counts for something, for a great deal, when they are broadcasting, because of the large number of listeners. The British Broadcasting Corporation have admirable announcers, but even they cannot be expected to be omniscient in matters of pronunciation, and it has been found necessary to establish a committee which recommends certain pronunciations of words that have more than one form in educated speech. There can be little doubt that these pronunciations will tend to prevail, and the general character of the announcer's speech will be taken by many as a model and a criterion of good speech. There is much evidence that listeners are growing more and more critical of the pronunciation of those who address them over the wireless. The stage also serves as a means of spreading uniformity of speech. The actor is rightly condemned if he mumbles or indulges in mannerisms. He is expected to speak well, to use a form of speech that will be acceptable in whatever part of the English-speaking world he may be performing. When we are in doubt as to the pronunciation of a word, we often turn to a dictionary. Those compiled by Walker and by Webster have exerted considerable influence on pronunciation. And now we have the Pronouncing Dictionary, compiled by Professor Daniel Jones, which gives the standard pronunciation, together with variants found in educated Southern English speech, of some 50,000 words.
Well, there we go, viewers. I think that taught us something, didn't it? Pronunciation, yes. People say I've got some sort of accent, but I've never noticed it. I'm just going off to do a bit of riding. Thank you, viewers, and goodbye.